what they do. They invited me on as a courtesy because they thought I had a big social media following. They spoke for about 45 minutes, and at the end of the 45 minutes, they asked me, "What do you think, Nathaniel?" And I said, "Everything you said is an absolute waste of my time. Everything." And I said, "If you don't make this choice right now, it's going to backfire on you. Because what I hear you doing is this. You're giving the world a choice of three. It's either Hamas, Israel, or the Palestinians. And they're never going to choose Israel when you give them a choice of three. You have to put Hamas and the Palestinians in bed together, because by virtue of the fact, they are in bed together."
Yeah.
Yes.
They argued with me. They said, "What does an Australian actor know about anything?" And I said, "I guarantee you when the airstrikes start hitting Gaza, the world is going to turn on you." Every single person who was on that phone call months later called me and said, "You were right, what do we do now?" Wow. The problem is we're playing too nice a game with the Palestinian people who hate you.
Yes.
And I've been fortunate to be able to be in those rooms where I've heard what Palestinians say about you. I grew up in an Islamic Muslim society. I know exactly what they say behind closed doors.
Oh, share it with us. No, I'm just kidding.
You know, I was talking to a young 18-year-old boy in Gaza a few months ago. His name was Mido. I was trying to establish conversations and communication with people in Gaza because I wanted to understand and I wanted to know from their perspective. So I was reaching out to dozens on DM. Surprisingly, many reached back. And I had a long conversation with one of these young men called Mido. Unfortunately, he was killed a few months after we started talking. But one of the things that he said, and we got into a debate about, is I said, "Hamas hides in tunnels while you have to be on the surface. They're cowards." And he said, "No, Hamas uses these tunnels to protect us, and I'm for them." This was an 18-year-old. Now, when he was killed, the Palestinian and the pro-Hamas propaganda put out that he was a peace activist and he was just about life, and he was just this innocent 18-year-old kid who was caught up in this war, and that's not true. He was a 100% supporter of Hamas, and I have the documentation from our conversation to prove it. So this is the problem. We try and let them get away with so much, and that's what, you talk to any brave IDF soldier who fights in Gaza and they'll tell you it's hard to find innocence in this city. It's hard. Every house we go into is propaganda, hate. It's a radicalization. And when people say, I'm so upset what's happening to the children, so am I. But I'll tell you what I'm also upset about: the radicalization of children by Hamas for the last 18 years in Gaza. When you didn't care about those children, I did. So now, don't tell me you care just because Hamas is using them as a propaganda tool when there's 55,000 DLSR cameras in every single place where the Palestinians have had victims. It's unbelievable.
That's good. I totally agree with you, and you're spot on. And you got big matzo balls for speaking out. I know it's hard to speak on one thing because you've been exposed and you've already talked about a few things, and you've seen so much, and you've spent so much time in Israel post October 7th. What's one, though, of, I'm sure, probably hundreds, what's one experience, something you witnessed, story you've heard that you could share? I know it's hard to boil down to one. What's one?
I can share one. The first thing I'll say is every single time that we walk through the streets of Tel Aviv or Jerusalem and you're crossing and rubbing shoulders with young Israelis, know that you're walking past heroes. Every single day. Every single day you're walking past young men and women who have dedicated their life to defending the state of Israel, which is going to become increasingly important to every single person in this room as anti-Semitism rises.
100,000.
They are heroes, and Israel owes everything to this young generation. In the middle of the war, I think it was around November, I was doing a story on my security guard who was actually shot twice at the Nova Festival, and he continued to work after. And we were telling his story, and his story finishes at Ashkelon Hospital. So we were finishing the day up, it was late at night, we were going to Ashkelon Hospital to finish the story with him, and as I'm walking through the lobby, a woman meets me and she says, "Thank you so much for coming, Nate." And I said, I don't know who you are. And she said, "I messaged you on Instagram this morning. My brother was shot 7 times in Gaza. He's in the hospital here. I thought you were going to come and visit him." And I said, "I didn't know about it, but as soon as I'm finished filming, I'll go and visit your brother." So I finished filming and I went downstairs into a hospital room where there was a young man who was on life support. He was having oxygen forced into his lungs to stay alive. He was shot 7 times in Gaza. He was part of a special unit that works with dogs, and he was clearing a building when he was shot by a Hamas terrorist. They didn't expect him to live. They didn't expect him to come out of the coma. If he did, they expected that he would have brain damage, and they also expected that he would probably never walk again. What do you do in a situation like that when you're standing over a hospital bed of a young 21-year-old man you've never met, and you see his sister who's completely distressed? All I could offer at that point of time was prayer. So I prayed, and I prayed that Hashem would give this young man at least another day of life. And I left it at that. I left there, and I couldn't get this kid's face out of my mind. It was probably the first time that it really hit me what Israel has had to bear and the sacrifice Israel has to make. And so I continued my work. I was interviewing and trying to tell as many stories in Israel as possible. And then a few months later, I got news that he came out of his coma, which was incredible. As you can see, it's a very emotional thing for me. I've become very close with this young man. I got to meet him at Sheba Hospital, where he was receiving recovery. Not only is he walking again, but he's actually started a new degree to study. Incredible young man. And it's funny because my girlfriend's grandmother was sadly dying of cancer, so I was going to Sheba Hospital often to spend time with the family and visit her grandmother, and I would also go and visit Ben, and I would sit with him often, and we would just talk about life. And you go there with an intention to encourage him, inspire him, remind him of the good things of life, and you walk out of that room being inspired by the person you're supposed to inspire. And I think that's, for me, what makes Israel so special, the people. You are the most unique people I have ever met in my life. I'm not a Jew, I'm not an Israeli, but I consider you family, and I consider Israel a home, more than anywhere else in the world. And I'm always amazed at what these people have been able to do under so much. I mean, I always say to people, in fact, I'm starting to learn Hebrew, and I said to my Hebrew teacher, you know, there's a love story and there's a tragedy all happening at once. The Jewish people have been hunted and hated since the very beginning, and yet you've been faithfully loved by one person and one person alone the entire time, which is Hashem. And I know that's sometimes hard for people who are not religious. In fact, I was having a conversation about why is Israel so important, and why, you know, we can make the argument that it's your ancestral homeland just from archaeology, from history, from facts. But that's not what drives people to come back home. What drives people to come back home is a simple belief that God made a promise and you have to see it through, and He will see it through. And seeing this young man come back to life, and seeing Israel come back to life and come back together after October 7th has been one of the most encouraging and inspiring things that I've witnessed and seen. I've been given the privilege, Michael, to come alongside a nation. Maybe some of you know that I was given an incredible honor to light the torch on Independence Day, the first non-Israeli, non-Jew to ever do that in history. And I'll finish with this. The day we shot that, because of the war, we had to pre-record, so it was shot on the 8th of May, 2024. When I was on the drive back home, I was reflecting over the journey that I've been on with Israel, which started 7 years earlier. And that's when it hit me in the cab ride back to Tel Aviv. It's been 7 years since I first started coming to Israel, and I was curious as to what the exact date was when I first landed in Ben Gurion Airport to discover the Jewish people and the Jewish story. And as I was scrolling through my Instagram, I got to the first picture I posted from Caesarea Maritima. It's still on my Instagram today. And I remember writing a caption saying I was excited to be here, but I put hashtag, we used to do that, Purpose Holy Land tour. And the date that I first came to Israel was the 8th of May 2017, exactly 7 years to the day.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. And people would probably say, well, that's coincidence. And I would say, no, that's Hashem.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, I got to tell you, Nate, you've inspired me. I reached out to you and told you that. It's great to finally meet you. I know you've probably inspired a bunch of people in here. Your work, your heart, your passion. I don't even call it work. What you've been doing has been nothing short of just a blessing. And I know everybody appreciates it, and I know everybody appreciates what you shared tonight. And I'm just glad to get this chance to talk to you guys. Give it up one more time for Nate.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you guys. I'm gonna say one more thing before I walk off this stage. The most crucial thing that the Jewish people need to do is love one another. To love one another. So every single person in this room, there's an Israel and there's a greater Israel. And so what you guys do for one another is going to be the most important thing about the future of this nation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nate.